Hi there, Catherine Mattice. I am the conference chair this year for the International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment. If you can believe it, there is a place where people who focus on solving harassment and bullying go every few years. This year, it's the United States. It's the first time ever. I'm joined by two of the speakers and attendees at the conference. We've got Jenna Leyton-Jones and Carole Ross, both employment law attorneys and investigators. I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Carole Ross. I'm with Ross Employment Law. I've been an attorney for approximately 30 years. My practice focuses on workplace investigations into allegations of workplace misconduct like bullying, harassment, discrimination, and retaliation.
And hi, I'm Jenna Leyton-Jones. I'm also an employment law attorney with Leyton-Jones Law, and my focus is on keeping companies out of the courtroom, and I try to do that by providing independent workplace investigations. I provide day-to-day advice and counsel, as well as employee training.
Awesome, thank you. And I just mentioned, I've been doing these all day, these recordings, and I've spoken to coaches and consultants and researchers and lawyers from different countries and all of this. So I'm really excited to have you both at the conference and to participate in this conversation around harassment and bullying and what you're seeing and finding in your work. So, we're all in California. Secret, they're both in San Diego. They're my friends. Abusive conduct is a sort of a new term here in the United States. So as investigators, what challenges have you been facing as you've been getting more and more of these requests for investigations around this topic?
Well, as you mentioned, the concept of bullying is relatively new in California and also in many other jurisdictions. It's more undefined and more ambiguous of a concept. Unlike harassment and discrimination, there's no body of case law to help guide the investigator or the investigation. One person's idea of bullying can be another person's idea of efficient management. So when it comes to investigations for bullying, it can be important to ask more focused questions so interviews don't devolve into a complaint session or tell me everything you hate about your colleague down the hall.
Yeah, this is not therapy.
It is not therapy. It is, not time to just vent. And one of the other tough problems is that with a bullying investigation, I think it is important for the investigator not to act like the personality police. People are different. People have different personalities. Diversity is good, including when it comes to personalities. And workplaces are different. Personalities in an accounting firm might differ from a marketing company or an art store.
Right. Right.
I also think, in my experience, a lot of times complaints of bullying derive from supervisors or managers, really legitimate attempts to hold employees accountable for legitimate performance deficiencies. A lot of times we hear employees say, my supervisor gave me some unfair criticism about my performance. I feel bullied. So I think from an investigative standpoint, we as investigators need to look at both the kind of the form and the substance of the conduct, because the form of a manager or supervisor, legitimate feedback about legitimate performance issues could in fact lead to a substantiation of a bullying claim, depending on the form of the feedback. So if the manager is, let's say, giving that negative feedback in a room full of people, or if the manager is yelling when they're giving that feedback. So those are sort of form issues that we as investigators need to look at in addition to just the substance. And I also think that there's a common misconception that bullying is illegal. I know that at least here in California, as well as in many other jurisdictions, workplace bullying is not currently illegal. It may be at some point in the future, but it's not currently. So I think a lot of times when employees bring or raise concerns about bullying, they're doing so with the belief that someone has engaged in some sort of illegal conduct. And they think that, some sort of aha moment or gotcha moment is going to result from the investigation into bullying. And because it's not illegal, that's not necessarily the case, although certainly if there is a substantiation of workplace bullying, it is important for the employer to take steps to try to remedy and rectify whatever is going on.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sometimes I get emails from managers. I'm being accused of bullying, but I'm just trying to hold people accountable. I always respond, well, just think about how you're giving that feedback or holding people accountable and go from there. Now, of course, we are coming out of a pandemic, hopefully, and have been online now together as a world for 2 years. So I would imagine cyberbullying is, I don't know if there's more or less of it, but I want to ask you about cyberbullying. What are some things that employers should be thinking about related to cyberbullying?
Yeah, I think employers definitely should have some policies aimed at trying to prevent cyberbullying. And when it comes to employer policies, it really is a legal balancing act, because in many jurisdictions, employers do have a legal obligation to protect their employees from harassment or from other types of inappropriate conduct. But employers also have to balance that obligation with their obligation to avoid infringing on other rights employees may have. For example, here in the United States, we have the National Labor Relations Act, which protects employees' rights to engage in what we call concerted activity, or basically to band together, to form unions, to discuss the terms and conditions of their employment. So it really is kind of a balancing act in terms of developing policies. What I always recommend to clients is that they really try to develop several different types of narrowly tailored, targeted policies toward things like cyberbullying. So I definitely recommend having a harassment prevention policy, a social media policy, an electronic communications policy, and certainly as part and parcel of all those policies to provide some sort of clear reporting channels for suspected misconduct. And I think it's also really important for employers to have a retaliation policy so that employers hopefully feel comfortable raising concerns about cyberbullying and other types of workplace misconduct without fear of reprisal.
Yeah, I remember the National Labor Relations Board came out a long time ago, I feel like, around civility codes could be hindering concerted activity and all of that. So anyway, Carole, what are your thoughts about cyberbullying?
So I agree with Jenna that the policies are very important. And another component is training. Sometimes it's your abusive conduct or anti-bullying training is part of harassment prevention training. Sometimes it's standalone, but it's time to revamp that training, that old training that you've been giving to your employees for so many years in light of our shift to more remote work. Right now, we are communicating electronically more than ever. We've got less face-to-face interaction among employees, making it harder to build rapport and trust, making it more likely that electronic communications are going to be misinterpreted or misconstrued. And employees should really receive training on what cyberbullying might look like. It can be in a text message, a chat message when you're on Zoom or Teams, Slack messages, Skype, LinkedIn, all of those things can add to it. And it's important employees understand that a private message is not necessarily private, especially if it's communicated via the employer's computer system. And managers and supervisors need to understand their reporting obligations if they receive a complaint of possible bullying or observe possible cyberbullying.
Okay. And what about the pandemic? Has that changed, other than maybe doing your investigation interviews on Zoom? What else does that change? How else have investigations changed?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Catherine. I mean, I would say from my perspective, really the biggest change to workplace investigations in light of COVID has been, in many cases, a shift towards either all Zoom interviews in a particular investigation, or at least, a chunk of Zoom interviews. Typically, I will defer to the client in terms of whether they prefer Zoom interviews or in person or some combination. Some clients prefer to have complete remote interviews. Some prefer to have complete in-person interviews, sometimes with masks, sometimes without masks. It just sort of depends on the client's comfort level and whatever their specific situation is. The good news is, I think now that we're 2+ years into a pandemic, or hopefully coming out of it soon, I think people are a lot more comfortable with Zoom than they were at the beginning of the pandemic. I think there are definitely positives to Zoom interviews. I think sometimes people do feel more comfortable when they're sitting at home in their living rooms or home office, as opposed to, walking into sort of a sterile conference room space at an office and meeting this complete stranger who starts asking them a bunch of, detailed and quasi-personal questions. I think from a confidentiality standpoint, sometimes employees feel more comfortable if they're at home. They know nobody's, a coworker isn't listening in through the walls or anything like that. So those are some of the positives, I think, from Zoom and from the shift that we've seen in light of COVID. There are some negatives too. I think sometimes it can be more difficult to build rapport with witnesses via Zoom. And certainly there's always the possibility of those technological challenges. But luckily, I think at this point, we've all gotten used to having to tackle some of those.
Yeah. Anything to add, Carole?
Yeah, in addition to the form, I think the substance of the complaints that I've been seeing have changed. Before the pandemic, bullying concerns often included a physical component.
Mhm.
And sometimes it could be yelling, but sometimes it was more physical, like someone blocking a coworker's path, or an employee might complain his supervisor is throwing paper clips at him during meetings to supposedly just signal when he was going off track or talking too much.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing that as much because the employees aren't together. So yes, there's the yelling sometimes, but we're seeing more remote bullying. And sometimes it comes through video, but sometimes it's also written communications. I'm seeing that circumstances when employees are adding more people than necessary to an email, really to embarrass the person that they're criticizing or involving in the discussion, using all caps in an email, interrupting people on Zoom. And it does happen. It's hard to get social cues as much on Zoom. But seeing that demeaning languages in Slack messages and other platforms, and employees need to keep in mind that the use of electronic media makes it easier for information to be captured. Screenshotting on Zooms, I'm seeing that when employees complain. Sometimes they have screenshots of exactly what happened, or Slack channels that were supposedly private, but really aren't so private.
Right. I was going to ask you that. Has cyberbullying increased? And I guess it makes sense that it has, since we're communicating more cyber. So the bullying would increase. What are you two most excited about with the conference? What are you looking forward to?
I'm excited to meet other people in our field, but also in related fields for workplace bullying, because I'm interested in the educational side of it and learning more from not the legal aspect, but from an educational aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. My world, I deal with a lot of attorneys. So I think just being able to gain knowledge and hear, so many world-renowned experts in this field speak and share their knowledge, and hopefully pick up, tidbits from people that are not attorneys and maybe are looking at things differently. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, me too. I got to tell you, doing all these recordings, just hearing all the different perspectives and how people tackle addressing this based on their own personal experiences and variety of education and professional backgrounds. It's going to be cool. It's going to be epic. Well, thank you two for joining me today. And I'll see you at the conference in September, and probably before that, since we all live in San Diego.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks for having us.